During my lifetime, Jonathan grew weary of our relationship, gave me divorce papers, and married the woman he truly loved, who was expecting his child. On the day of his wedding, I perished in a car crash, but Jonathan spiraled into madness after my death. Eventually, I was resurrected. Jonathan claimed that I hadn't been involved with her. I intend to prove it by presenting phone logs, vehicle records, and surveillance footage of my daily movements. He pleaded desperately, asking if we could reconcile. I declined. When I once cherished him, he had grown tired of me. Now that he genuinely offers his affection, I no longer desire it. Jonathan habitually attempted to kiss me goodbye, but I smiled and avoided him. His expression darkened. He became distant. What other way could he cause trouble? I had already apologized regarding Olivia. I smiled softly and explained, "I'm not trying to cause any issues. I just have a cold and don't want to pass it on to you." Jonathan stared at me. "Olivia, if you're worried I'll betray you, keeping me isn't the solution, you know." I looked up at him, laughed heartily, and responded, "All right, go to work. Olivia is still waiting for you." Jonathan's face darkened. He slammed the door and left. I maintained my smile, then went to his brother, Alex's room, and gently asked, "Are you hungry? Let's go downstairs for breakfast." Alex, who was standing by the window, turned to face me. His dark, composed eyes softened slightly as he nodded. "Sure." As Alex and I went downstairs, Jonathan called me again. "Olivia, I'm sorry for drinking with Sophia and coming home late the other night. I was just drunk. Nothing happened. This is my third apology. Please stop being immature and causing problems." Understood. I handed the milk to Alex, feeling nothing inside, even finding it somewhat amusing. I knew nothing transpired between them now, but I was also aware of what might occur in the future. Having died once, this was my second chance at life. In my previous existence, I watched Jonathan and Sophia grow closer, cried, shouted, and tried to intervene, but I couldn't do anything. I could only witness Jonathan becoming increasingly distant, spending more nights away. Eventually, he handed me divorce papers when Sophia became pregnant. On their wedding day, I sought out Jonathan to change his mind, but was involved in a car accident. In the emergency room, with my last bit of strength, I tried to call him. He didn't answer. Sophia did, with a triumphant tone. "Please, don't interfere with my husband. Stay away from married men." In despair, I threw the phone away, losing all will to live. As I closed my eyes for the final time, feeling pain and cold, lying alone in the hospital, my parents were abroad. Everyone attended Jonathan's wedding. The doctors informed everyone except Alex, the neglected illegitimate child, who rushed to the hospital to say his final goodbye. I remember him whispering softly in my ear, "Don't worry, I'll avenge you, even if it means dismantling the entire family." I glanced at his face, once handsome but now filled with resentment. I couldn't thank him and reluctantly closed my eyes. My deepest wish before departing was that if given another life, I would never love Jonathan again. To my astonishment, my wish was granted, and I was reborn. When I regained consciousness, it was the night before. Jonathan and I had our first argument because of Sophia. They went out for dinner after work, got intoxicated, and returned home late at night, smelling of perfume. I created a scene, crying incessantly, while Jonathan merely massaged his forehead impatiently, saying he had been drunk, and Sophia took care of him for a few hours. This is when I returned. Reflecting on my past life, I was certain that at this point, Jonathan and Sophia hadn't begun their relationship yet. I had the chance to prevent it, but I kept silent, quietly wiped my tears, grabbed the blanket, and went to the guest room to sleep, ignoring all of Jonathan's knocks on the door. I recalled the vow I made in my previous life. If given another chance, I would never love Jonathan again. I didn't care how things unfolded between him and Sophia. I could even disrupt them. This new life was challenging. I didn't want to be caught in a love whirlwind. I wanted to live for myself and repay the last person who had supported me. Alex and I were having breakfast at a cafe. He kept his head down, revealing a portion of his slender neck, his dark eyelashes obscuring his deep eyes, making his expression hard to read. Since he was brought back home, he had been silent and reserved. They ostracized his background. Almost no one remembered him except me, bringing him gifts on holidays and sending him medicine when he was ill. A small effort that led to a final farewell. It was worthwhile. He inherited a small company from the family that was on the brink of bankruptcy. I noticed he struggled with sleep, often waking in the middle of the night to drink water. Seeing his pale face and dark circles under his eyes, I thought to myself, since you're not looking well, maybe your company is struggling. Do you need help? I can invest. My parents are overseas, and I manage all the industries in our country. In my past life, I graduated from a prestigious university, but invested all my efforts into Jonathan. However, Jonathan disliked me being in the spotlight. He didn't appreciate strong women, so I handed over the company to him and willingly assumed the role of a submissive wife, driving him to work and waiting for him to return home. But in the end, he grew tired of me. He thought I was confined to the home, narrow-minded, and only focused on love. Sophia, on the other hand, was different. She worked with him in the business world, had a different perspective, and earned his admiration. In this life, I refused to be trapped at home again. I wanted to return to my company. Alex glanced at me, then looked down. It was just a nightmare. You should focus on yourself when you have the time. It's been 3 years of marriage, and you haven't visited your own businesses, have you? I wiped my mouth. I will reclaim my businesses. If you need investment, come find me. I have a responsibility. Alex looked deeply into my eyes, then lowered his head to eat, seeming to contemplate something. After a moment, he spoke. Can I rent 2 floors of the office building under your name at market price? I explained that the rent for my company was too high, and I had been wanting to relocate. I thought if I rented to him, he would frequent the building with my company, making it easier for me to repay him. So I readily agreed, called the company's secretary, and gave instructions. Within 10 minutes, Jonathan called. Are you going to rent the office building to Alex? I was standing in front of the mirror, trying on professional attire I hadn't worn in a long time, and casually replied, yes. What's Alex's background? Why are you dealing with him? Jonathan's voice was filled with anger. You've been home for too long, not good at reading people. My father has so many illegitimate children, but only he managed to secure a place in our family. His methods are beyond your imagination. He ordered me, just stay at home. Don't get involved in business matters. Go buy a bag, some clothes, pamper yourself. I chuckled. But that's my business. I added, at least it was before we got married. Jonathan hesitated for a moment, then asked me indifferently, are you still mad at me? No, I replied earnestly. I won't be upset regardless of how things are between you and Sophia. I just want to take back my business. Do you think I embezzled your money? Jonathan asked sternly. You wouldn't. I shook my head. I don't have such thoughts. I just want my business back. It's that simple. In my previous life, he never embezzled my businesses. When we divorced, he returned everything to me. Jonathan, apart from cheating and causing my car accident, hadn't made any other mistakes. But this betrayal was enough for me to never forgive him. Jonathan's voice turned cold. As you wish, but my people will leave one by one. This was the first time I defied him. The punishment he gave me, I nodded with a smile. As you wish. True to his word, Jonathan swiftly transferred a third of his staff within a few hours, leaving me with a significant headache. But I wasn't worried. Once you've experienced death, you realize there's nothing more frightening. During the transition, his employees advised me that the company was more stable under Jonathan's management. You should relax at home and wait for him to bring back the money. I politely gestured, saying, I wish you all the best. I remained unmoved, irritating Jonathan. He called, Don't challenge the field you're not suited for. You're just a pampered pet rabbit. You should stay at home being cute and carefree. While reviewing the company's financial statements and noting key points in my notebook, I laughed. What about Sophia? How can she support you in the business world? He retorted, She's a cunning fox by nature. I reminded him slowly, Sophia and I were classmates in college. I was academically superior to her even in school. I even recommended her job to you and me. Perhaps Jonathan didn't realize that the cute and carefree rabbit he imagined me to be also possessed courage. Hence the saying, a rabbit kicking an eagle. In the past life, I used that courage to face death. In this lifetime, I'll use it to face life. Late that night, Jonathan returned home at 1 a.m. He smelled of Sophia's favorite perfume and a hint of alcohol. I was sitting under the light, reviewing reports when I casually said, "Take a bath before sleeping?" Jonathan's eyebrows furrowed coldly. "Why aren't you causing a scene tonight?" I stretched lazily. "I have other things on my mind. Business dinners are normal, right?" Jonathan stared at me as if unfamiliar with this new version of me. He seemed to still expect me to cry and ask for explanations. Instead, I walked into the bathroom, removed my face mask, and calmly proceeded with my skincare routine. He followed me, standing at the doorway, watching me through the mirror as he began to explain, "I dined with a client. Sophia got drunk, so I took her home." I gave him a thumbs up. "My husband is the best boss. Good luck to you and your secretary. Good luck with Sophia getting pregnant soon." By then, I would have sorted out the company affairs, hired new people, and could present him with the remaining 2/3 of the company's management team, along with the divorce agreement, all as a gift. But Jonathan's expression darkened. Good luck isn't used in this context. He reached out to me. "Olivia, don't be stubborn. Be good, okay?" I smiled. Jonathan didn't know the truth about himself. He loved the cunning fox while expecting me to be the good girl. I walked past him, picked up the duvet. "You go to sleep first. I'm still recovering from a cold. I'll sleep in the adjacent room." Jonathan's face darkened. He grabbed my arm, gritting his teeth. "Do you think I will never change? And that's why you're so cocky?" I raised an eyebrow at him. "That's right." I pushed his hand away and went to the guest room. I was confident because my confidence was based on my heart, which no longer loved. Dead heart, empty sphere, nothing. I heard Jonathan's heavy footsteps downstairs, the door closing, the car starting, all in one swift motion. After a while, I saw Sophia's social media account. No image, just 2 words. Heartbreaking. I commented with a grin, "Check out instant heart-healing medicine." She replied with an awkward smile. I turned off the phone, lit a cigarette, and watched the amber flicker in the darkness. There's a place in my heart that's slowly cracking open. Old wounds are oozing out. In this life, I accelerated Jonathan's pace of cheating. I once hoped that in a different life, things would be different. But nothing's changed. He's still heading towards Sophia right under my nose. The next morning, Alex and I arrived at the company together. The entire office building belongs to me, and fortunately, there were 2 empty floors, so I rented them out to him. Jonathan didn't return all night and only called me around noon. Gritting his teeth, "What's your relationship with Alex? Why are you being disobedient because of him?" I calmly replied, "The vacant floor just means losing money. If Alex can pay market price, then I'll rent it to him. What's the problem?" "You're too concerned, isn't he your brother?" "I've told you he's cunning. Keep your distance from him," Jonathan said coldly. "If he's suddenly moving downstairs to your building, he definitely has ulterior motives. Don't come crying to me later to clean up the mess." I politely smiled and said, "All right, thank you for the warning. Is there anything else, Jonathan?" "Olivia, when will you stop being unreasonable?" Jonathan was close to losing his temper. My patience had limits. Glancing at Alex, who was eavesdropping nearby, I gestured for him to leave and chuckled. "Honey, real unreasonableness looks like this. Where were you last night?" "Show me the car's GPS. Your call records?" Jonathan fell silent. After a while, he sighed and reluctantly told me to behave, then hung up the phone. I sighed too. In my previous life, his subtle actions drove me to the brink of insanity, and I once pushed him to the limit like this. I still remember the disdain in his eyes. He said Sophia would never inspect him like this. He claimed that even if something happened between him and Sophia, it was because I forced his hand. Now, I don't investigate anything about him, but he doesn't seem too pleased either. Alex sat across from me, took a sip of tea, and said, "You're unhappy." Trying to force a smile, I replied, "Corals aren't supposed to make you happy." Alex lowered his gaze and concealed his emotions. He said, "I have ulterior motives towards you." I shrugged it off and casually asked, "Do you?" Alex suddenly looked up, his dark eyes reflecting my figure. Yes, not holding back. I smiled and said, "What do you want? Tell me and I'll offer it to you." I remember wrongs and, more so, kindness. The past life's gratitude must be repaid in this one. Alex quietly sipped his tea, not saying a word, but with a slight attractive smile on his lips. In the following days, I was so busy that I'd return home around 10 every night, but Jonathan returned even later than me. I didn't bother with him, just locked myself in the guest room and went to sleep after freshening up. Jonathan seems to be in pain. I'm your wife. I should be sleeping with you. I've caught a cold. You've had a cold for 2 months. Jonathan suddenly exploded. I'll show you the call records. I'll show you the car records. I'll show you the tracking of my daily route. I even copied the surveillance footage of Sophia's house for you. He's exhausted. Let me in, okay? I didn't open the door. When I needed him, he found me annoying. Now that he offers himself, I'm not interested. Jonathan slept outside my door all night with bloodshot eyes. The next morning, he looked at me intently, not missing any expression on my face. Have you stopped loving me? I gently stroked his face and smiled. Don't overthink it. I just have a cold. In a previous life, I might have been moved, hugged him, and cried bitterly. But in this life, I just quietly watched him storm off after slamming the door. Having died once, people can become more ruthless. Jonathan didn't come home for several days. Sophia called me, concerned. What's going on between you and Jonathan? He's been so down lately, always calling me to drink late at night. I stared at the files on the computer and asked her several business-related questions. Sophia is competent at work, so why not utilize her skills? Sophia was puzzled by my response. You care more about your company than about the fact that Jonathan isn't coming home? She implied something. He always calls me to drink and constantly complains that I am immature. Aren't you afraid of being replaced in the long run? Perhaps by me, right? I stared at the computer absent-mindedly and asked. Sophia paused. I just can't bear to see Jonathan in pain. I just want to comfort him. I smiled and repeated her words from a past life verbatim. Please refrain from bothering my husband. Keep your distance from married people. Sophia was speechless. She didn't say anything and hung up. I stared at the computer for a while. In this life, I still couldn't handle Sophia's provocations. The crack in my heart began to ache again. It turns out that in this life, one can still remember the pain from the previous life so vividly. At the peak of my pain, Jonathan called Sophia, saying, "Did you misunderstand her earlier and even scold her?" I nodded and waited for Jonathan to explode. In a previous life, I was incited by her, scolded her harshly, and then Jonathan exploded, calling me ignorant and vulgar. But now, Jonathan smiled as he said, "Olivia, you still care about me, don't you?" He smiled contentedly. Not arguing back is equivalent to admitting. I nodded. Okay. Things that the company have settled down recently. With the help of my parents, I found some reliable people, and Alex even lent me a few highly capable executives. With the company in good shape, it was time to clarify some things. As it approached closing time, I packed up and prepared to go to the restaurant Jonathan had reserved. Alex suddenly came upstairs and saw me reapplying lipstick. While looking at me, he said, "Jonathan is downstairs with a bunch of roses and a sports car." I know. I closed the lipstick and said, "I'm having dinner with him tonight." Alex lowered his head and inquired with a puzzled expression, "Have you made up?" "No, I need to discuss something." Alex shook his head. With his hands in his pockets and deep, unreadable eyes, he asked, "Do you still have feelings for Jonathan?" "What's that? You want relationship advice?" I chuckled. Alex also laughed with a hint of mystery in his smile. If one day I become an enemy of Jonathan, will you hold a grudge against me? I had already guessed some of it. Alex's dealings in the capital market couldn't avoid Jonathan's industries. As he spoke of them, his tone became increasingly indifferent, devoid of any affection, openly and shamelessly cold. Wolves are bound to hunt sooner or later. I raised a finger to my lips and said, "Don't tell anyone about this. I'll act like I haven't heard." In the split second as I turned around, Alex's barely audible voice reached my ears. You can never imagine why I'm going after him. My hearing is sharp. I heard him. I turned my head in confusion. Why? Alex smiled faintly at me. I said it was because I had nightmares. Do you believe that? A ludicrous excuse, but I still nodded. I do. Because in his eyes, I saw not only my shadow, but also deep-seated unease and fear. It must have been a very terrifying dream. Downstairs, Jonathan stood by the sports car with a huge bunch of roses, attracting the attention of passers-by. They all looked at me with envy, but I felt it was unnecessary. When he first pursued me, he was sincere, passionate, and willing to bare his heart and soul. Everyone said I would be very happy, and I thought so too. But then he cheated. I died. The past moments of tenderness turned into smoke and dissipated. I took the flowers, threw them into the car, and said, "No need to spend so much. It's just for show." He put his arm around me. I dodged and got into the car. I saw the disappointment on Jonathan's face, but pretended not to notice. At the restaurant, Jonathan ordered a table full of dishes I loved. I fell silent. In a previous life, when I wanted to reconcile with him, I once invited him to dinner here. In the same spot, he inadvertently ordered a table full of dishes Sophia loved. It broke my heart. We argued, but he didn't admit it. After that falling out, Sophia got pregnant. Now sitting in the familiar place, looking at the table of dishes catering to my taste, I couldn't eat. There was a vague ache in my heart. I knew it was the naive girl from the past, crying in my heart. Jonathan sighed. It seems like we haven't been out together in a long time. I nodded since you met Sophia. A hint of embarrassment flashed across Jonathan's face. I really have nothing with her. It started with admiration, but then it was all just to make you jealous. He reached out his hand and covered mine. His palm was warm, just like before. Unfortunately, I'm not the same person I used to be. I pulled my hand away, sighed, and said, "How nice it would have been if you had said that in a previous life." "What?" Jonathan asked in confusion. I stood upright. "It's nothing." "I wanted to talk to you about something today. I have something to say as well." Jonathan said, "Olivia, I want to pursue you again." I interrupted him, "But I want a divorce." Jonathan was stunned, seemingly not understanding. He even asked me with a smile, "What did you say?" Leaning forward, I said, "I want a divorce, Jonathan. I want to divorce you." Jonathan hesitated and seemed to retreat. I leaned forward again, saying, "Jonathan, we don't need to continue. I've drafted the divorce agreement. If your people at my company need it, I can return it to them." Furrowing his brows, Jonathan took out a cigarette, lit it, took a deep drag, remembered it was a non-smoking restaurant, and put it out. He took a deep breath and asked with a slight frown, "Is it because of Sophia?" I hesitated. It made some sense. After all, in my previous life, Sophia's pregnancy led to my divorce and subsequent car accident. Jonathan saw my hesitation, slammed the table heavily, and growled, "I really didn't touch her. I just wanted to see you in a fuss." Confused, I said, "But you don't like me fussing, do you? Did you have a mental breakdown in the last life? Or did you change in this life? I don't like you being hysterical, but damn, can't you have any feelings at all?" Jonathan seemed deeply hurt. I listened, puzzled. After a moment, something dawned on me. "No, it's not because of Sophia, Jonathan. It's all because of you." I coldly stood up, saying, "Tearing the agreement won't stop me from drafting a new one. It's useless, Jonathan." Jonathan stood up. "Let's go. Let's go back home." He didn't mention the agreement again, as if the whole thing hadn't happened. On the way home, he kept talking about things that might interest me. Luxury goods, clothes, handbags, jewelry, and fashion shows. But now I was only interested in my company. I didn't really understand what he was talking about. When we got back, he watched me go to bed without saying anything, just sighed imperceptibly, "Hope your cold gets better soon." After that day, Jonathan changed. He came home every day at 8, always holding a gift. Sometimes limited edition bags, sometimes designer jewelry, sometimes flowers flown in from Europe. I occasionally stayed late at work, and he would quietly wait at home. When I returned, he would present the gift. If I refused, he would insist, saying, "You didn't know waiting for someone to come home would be so uncomfortable." I lowered my head and said, "There was a time when I couldn't sleep all night suffering." Jonathan asked, "When was that?" I smiled at him and said, "It's a story from the last life." Jonathan thought I was joking, gave me the gift with a hint of pleading in his eyes. "Olivia, when will your cold get better?" I placed the gift on the couch and looked at him sincerely. "It won't get better in this life." Jonathan's eyes dimmed, but he forced a smile. "I don't believe that. I'll wait for you." I didn't say anything and went into the guest room. A few days later, Jonathan told me about an important cocktail party that required us to attend as a couple. I wanted him to bring Sophia, but Jonathan insisted that others were bringing their wives, and he couldn't take his secretary. Being in charge of my own company now, I understood the importance of networking. I also wanted to attend the cocktail party to make connections, so I nodded in agreement. That evening, I attended the party with Jonathan. Jonathan looked at me with fascination. "You look really beautiful." I just smiled nonchalantly. I used to devote all my time to beauty treatments and makeup, but Jonathan barely noticed. I was just wearing a gown and light makeup tonight, not as elaborate as in the past life, but he was captivated. Humans are truly strange and perplexing creatures. Alex was also at the dinner, raised his glass to me, his eyes seemingly bottomless, emotions unreadable, but he didn't bring a partner. I doubted if Jonathan had lied to me about the rule of having to bring a partner because even Sophia was there alone. Seeing Jonathan holding on to me, Sophia's eyes dimmed for a moment. Then she smiled and came over to greet us. "Jonathan, your wife looks lovely tonight." She bit her lip, looking at Jonathan pitifully, adding a touch of controlled forbearance. Jonathan gave her a fleeting glance, then quickly looked away and nodded. "Yes, she's beautiful." Sophia, forcing a smile, said, "Congratulations on reconciling with your wife." She continued, "Jonathan would come to my house drunk and chat about his wife all night. We haven't reconciled." I interrupted her. Sophia was taken aback, a flash of resentment in her eyes. I smiled and repeated, "No reconciliation. I'm here purely for business." "You can rest assured." I thought Sophia would be delighted, but she was rather regretful and angry, saying, "How many people love Jonathan, but I treat his love like garbage," not realizing the good thing was right in front of her. I turned to ask Jonathan, "Does your secretary have the right to speak to me like that?" Sophia also looked at him, her eyes full of pity and affection. "If I were a man, I wouldn't be able to pass this test. Sophia should be an actress." But Jonathan's face turned cold, and he scolded her, "This is my family affair. Why are you meddling? No, your place. Don't get involved in things you shouldn't." Sophia and I were both stunned. Jonathan looked at me again. "If you don't like her, I can make her leave the company. Even leave the city, never to bother you again." His gaze towards me was full of affection, but towards Sophia it was impatient. I should be happy because this symbolizes my complete victory over my rival after being reborn, right? But I couldn't be happy. I just felt indifferent. It was the same as my past life, only Sophia and I had switched places. Whether it was me or Sophia who was disliked by him, there was no difference. I couldn't be happy. I thought more about the bitterness of being rejected. In my past life, Sophia ran away crying, and Jonathan grabbed my arm. "Fanny, will your cold get better like this?" I lowered my eyes. How could it get better? It never could in this lifetime. Some things are irreparable, like a life. I shook my head. It won't get better, never will. Jonathan, stop dreaming. Let's get divorced. Jonathan was taken aback. His face gradually darkened. He pulled me to a corner. "Olivia, how could you doubt me when it comes to Sophia? What do you want from me?" I pushed Jonathan away, the accumulated wounds from the past bursting out at that moment. "I don't want anything from you. Just get a divorce. What you do with Sophia has nothing to do with me. I just want to leave you. Do you understand?" Jonathan pulled me back, gritting his teeth. "You're dreaming." He suddenly lowered his head and kissed my lips vaguely, proclaiming, "Olivia, you will never get a divorce in this lifetime." I felt disgusted. These lips had also kissed Sophia. Even if it was in a previous life, I couldn't forgive that. That's how petty I am. Without thinking, I raised my hand and gave Jonathan a hard slap across his face. The sound was clear and loud, causing Jonathan's face to swell immediately. I wiped my lips forcefully as if trying to scrub off a layer of skin. "Stay away from me!" Jonathan's face turned pale and then purple. Eventually, his eyes looked at me with a cold and indifferent gaze. He sneered. "Olivia, well done. No one has ever hit me before." He took a step back, his eyes fixed on me. "Since you don't want me, I'll show you that I can have anyone I want in my bed." With that said, he turned and walked briskly towards Sophia, wrapping her in his arms and leaving the banquet hall. I crouched down, tears inexplicably falling down my cheeks. I didn't know why I was crying, but the tears came without warning. I guessed it was the foolish girl from my past life who was crying. People started to notice me as I was the only one crouching at the party. Whisperers began to surround me. Some approached to inquire about my well-being, but I ignored them, just wanting to cry my heart out. Alex pushed through the crowd, walked up to me, and extended his hand, saying, "I'll take you home." With teary eyes, I looked up and saw his handsome face full of fierceness, just like in the past life. Memories from both past lives intertwined, and I cried uncontrollably. I grabbed his hand, letting him pull me into his arms. His voice was cold, as if suppressing anger. "Don't worry, I'll turn the whole world upside down to help you seek revenge." I trembled. Was it a coincidence? Why did his words sound exactly the same as in my past life? I wanted to ask him, but I couldn't speak through tears. I let him take me home. He wiped away my ruined makeup and tears with a damp cloth, held me in his arms like a child, saying, "Olivia, don't cry. I'll help you vent your anger, seek revenge, don't cry." Exhausted, burdened by memories of 2 lifetimes, I nestled in his arms and cried myself to sleep. The next day, I felt him pick me up, carry me to the guest room, tuck me in, and lock the door. I didn't sleep soundly, and in the middle of the night I was startled by a loud knocking on the door. Jonathan was there again, drunken, shouting, "Open the door, Olivia! Open the door for me! I'm your husband! I want to come in!" He shouted hoarsely, "I can't bring myself to hurt Sophia. You're all on my mind. You rejected me. Open the door, Olivia. I won't allow you to reject me." Tears streamed down my face once again. Memories of lying alone in the hospital waiting to die overwhelmed me. I flung the door open and slapped Jonathan across the face. Jonathan stood there shocked. Before he could react, I slapped him again. With tears streaming down my face, I cried out, "Jonathan, I lost my life for you. A life. Can you get it back?" I sobbed. "When I was dying in the cold hospital, you were getting married to Sophia. I called you begging for a change of heart, but you wouldn't even pick up the phone. You cut off my lifeline. I didn't die in a car accident. I died at your hands." Jonathan stood there dumbfounded, opened his mouth but didn't know what to say. I crouched down, covering my face. Some things once done have a predestined end, and no one can change that. Jonathan tried to reach out to help me. "Olivia, I understand something is wrong with you mentally, right? Are you so afraid of me and Sophia being together that you're hallucinating?" "It's okay, Olivia. Tomorrow I'll arrange for a doctor. We'll go get you checked, and once you see the doctor, everything will be fine." His words were cut off abruptly as the person suddenly collapsed in front of me. Alex stood behind him, clapping his hands expressionlessly. "He talks too much. Let him rest for a while." I cautiously reached out to check Jonathan's breath and breathed a sigh of relief. He was still alive. Alex gave Jonathan a kick to the side and then squatted down beside me. I noticed he was trembling, his hands shaking violently as he held me tightly, as if we were survivors of a disaster, still shaken by the experience. I tried to get him to let go of me a few times, but he seemed to ignore my attempts and just kept holding me until dawn. I fell asleep, and before I drifted off, I heard his hoarse voice say, "That dream was real." I slept in Alex's arms for 2 hours, then woke up unable to sleep. The heaviness in my heart seemed to have dissipated, and I no longer felt the sorrow of the foolish girl from the past life crying. Perhaps she had finally found peace and decided to disappear from this world. After her departure, it was my turn to leave. I looked at Alex, who was still awake, his eyes that were once clear now bloodshot. As I opened my eyes, he held me tighter, as if afraid that I would also disappear. I weakly smiled at him. "Can you help me move out?" Alex nodded, stood up, and we walked past the still unconscious Jonathan in the hallway to start packing. In less than half an hour, I moved back to my parents' empty house. Before leaving, I took a look at the house that had been tidied up and no longer bore any signs of my existence. I chuckled bitterly, turned towards the rising sun, and walked out. Every day afterward felt brand new. After I moved out, Jonathan immediately fired Sophia. Then he tried to pester me, beg me, and coax me, but he didn't dare to go too far, always feeling that I had a mental illness, and provoking me would trigger an episode. Apart from divorce, he agreed to everything I demanded, and if I got upset, he would leave immediately. Later, he didn't have much time to focus on his feelings. Alex started his revenge on Jonathan, a carefully planned scheme that left Jonathan scrambling. No one had expected that the once neglected child would one day grow into a wolf and turn back to devour his own family without reason. This revenge lasted for a year. Alex became a rising star in the business world, while Jonathan was left in shambles, never to recover. It was me who made Alex stop, not out of sympathy for Jonathan, but out of concern for Alex. Ever since that night he held me, his eyes were filled with hostility that never seemed to fade, only growing stronger. Sometimes he would fall silent out of nowhere, then hold me tightly, forcing me to promise to live well. I felt like the one with mental issues wasn't me, it was him. I pushed him to take a break from his scheming, but Alex refused. It made me angry. He was particularly afraid of me getting angry, always fearing that my anger would lead to irreparable actions. I found his paranoia amusing, not sure where he got that idea from. Alex eventually agreed to stop and rest, and Jonathan finally caught a breather and came looking for me. He was no longer the same as before, his once handsome face now scruffy and worn out. He used to never drink during the day, but now there was a hint of alcohol on him even in the afternoon. He forced a smile. "Since you left, every day has been torment for me. I haven't slept well in a long time." He sat in the chair, eyes showing signs of prolonged insomnia, and pleaded, "Olivia, let me sleep here for a while. When you were around, I could only rest well." I sighed, not saying a word. Jonathan soon fell asleep, but it wasn't a peaceful sleep. He seemed to be tossing and turning in his dreams, his eyes rolling beneath his eyelids, eyebrows furrowed fiercely. After a while, he grew restless and began sleep, talking. "No, stop, Olivia, stop it!" He even shouted, "Olivia, hold on, cooperate with the doctor. I'll come save you." He shouted for what seemed like an eternity. Then he sobbed, a man who never shed tears now weeping inconsolably. His sobs turned into heart-wrenching cries. I felt myself being swept away by his emotions, uncontrollable memories from the past swirling in my mind, from meeting, falling in love, to betrayal and death. Tears streamed down my face, choking backwards. Would the foolish girl from before be okay now, peacefully resting in eternity? It felt like a long time had passed when Jonathan suddenly woke from his dream, eyes swollen, tears still on his face. He jumped up, frantically reaching out to touch me, examining me closely, trembling as he whispered, "Olivia, you're alive, thank goodness." His eyes reddened. "I had a dream. I did something stupid in the dream, which made you leave." His voice was hoarse, tears streaming down. That dream was too terrifying. Suddenly, Jonathan paused. He stared at me in disbelief, trembling and hesitating as he asked, "I remember before you left. Did you say you risked your life for me, Olivia? Is that right?" Clutching my hand, he asked urgently, "Olivia, did you say you were reborn once? Or did I remember wrong while drunk? You said you had a second chance at life, right?" Knowing Jonathan for so many years, spanning 2 lifetimes, I had never seen him so cautious, each word spoken as if on thin ice. I even wondered if I was still the foolish girl from the previous life. Would I forgive this disheveled man in front of me? Unfortunately, I was not her. I smiled through tears. "What do you think?" Jonathan shook his head, wanting to smile but failing. "It doesn't make sense." I wiped my tears and neither confirmed nor denied. "I can't say. What's done is done. The wounds endured remain. A life lost is lost. I can't deny it, Nor will I. Jonathan rose abruptly, staggering backward, shaking and continuously denying it's not real. This isn't logical, it's just a dream. He forced a smile. Olivia, did your mental illness infect me? I gently told him, mental illness isn't contagious. I presented him with the divorce papers. Jonathan, I already risked my life for you once. Isn't one life enough for you to let me go? Divorce is the only way for both of us. Jonathan frantically denied, no, it's impossible. You infected me with your mental illness. I don't believe it. He stumbled and fled as if pursued by ghosts. For 3 days, Jonathan was completely missing. His family couldn't find him. 3 days later, Jonathan showed up at my office, clothes rumpled, looking utterly unrecognizable. His voice was hoarse. I dreamed for 3 days, dreams of past and present. Tears filled his eyes. I believe you now, Olivia. Jonathan extended his hand to me. Give me the divorce agreement. I'll sign it. Olivia, I have no face to win you back. I handed him the divorce agreement, and without even looking, he signed his name. As he left, tears rolled down his face. I will never marry again, never touch another woman. Olivia, this is my remorse for you. I watched his tired figure walk away, feeling a pang in my heart, but also a sense of relief. 2 lifetimes of marriage had finally come to an end. I closed my eyes strangely and somehow drifted into a dream, perhaps due to exhaustion. In my dream, scenes from our past lives flashed before me. It continued until I was in the hospital on my deathbed, and Alex hurried to escort me on my final journey. I thought my dream would end there as my life was ending, but it didn't. I saw Alex holding my cold body, tears streaming down his face. He gently wiped the blood off my face and whispered in my ear, when I come back for revenge, I'll tell you a secret. His tears fell on my face, cool and gentle. Later on, Alex began to retaliate against Jonathan, frantically destroying a prominent family to ruins, causing many to commit suicide or end up in jail. Jonathan, the head of the family, remained indifferent. Despite the collapse of his family and Sophia suffering a miscarriage due to the stress, everyone said Jonathan had gone mad. He searched everywhere for mediums, traveling the world to find someone to connect with my spirit. He visited every corner of his home country, then packed his bags for Nepal, India, Thailand, Mexico, and wherever else he could go. When his family fell and he ran out of money, he had to work odd jobs to continue searching for me. It took him 5 years to discover that someone had told him I had returned to the past. He started seeking ways to go back to the past. Another 5 years passed, and he had aged prematurely with silver hair. When Alex appeared in front of him, he coldly stated, "Even if you find her, would she be willing to see you? You killed her. Would you forgive the one who took her life?" Jonathan was stunned. He sat motionless all night and gave up searching for me the next day. He became an alcoholic, drinking day and night, beset by illness. He was taken to the hospital but refused treatment, abandoning all hope. As for Alex, he buried me in a sea of flowers, visiting me daily no matter how busy he was. He too drank, and when he got drunk, he would weep in front of my tombstone. Olivia, do you know why I spared Jonathan's life? Because I also want to find you. I tried everything fruitlessly, so I had to rely on Jonathan. At least he, like me, hasn't forgotten you. Maybe if there's one more person in the world who thinks of you, you'll come back. He would murmur to himself in front of my grave, Olivia, when everyone else looked down on me, only you would smile at me, care if I had a fever or was hungry, sneak gifts to me, and feed me medicine. He said, I promise to tell you a secret. The secret is from the first time you smiled at me, I fell in love with you. No one smiles more beautifully than you. And so he kept watch at my grave for a lifetime, never marrying. When I woke up from the dream, exhausted and tearful, I rushed downstairs to find Alex but couldn't. I called him, "Where are you?" After a moment of hesitation, Alex replied, "I'm in a garden." I hadn't heard of Alex visiting any garden, but a sudden intuition led me to the flower bed in the dream. I drove straight to the location and indeed found him amid a vast sea of delicate colors. His figure was slender, and his eyes seemed dazed as if he had just awakened from a dream. Without time to be surprised, he reached out his hand to me. "I just dreamed of you again." Still shaken, he continued, "In the dream, I watched over you for a lifetime here. I don't want to have that dream again." I placed my hand in his, letting him hold it, tears streaming down my face, and voluntarily asked, "Did you plant this flower seed?" Blushing slightly, he nodded and asked, "Why did you plant it?" "To show someone I like." "Has your loved one seen it?" Alex gazed deeply into my eyes, then gently pulled me into his embrace, saying, "She has seen it. She's right beside me." With a mixture of determination and a hint of nervousness, he added, "But I don't know if she likes me. Do you?" I nodded firmly. "I do." As I looked at his handsome face filled with incredulous joy, even his grip around my arms was gentle, afraid of hurting me. It was this careful man who had been tainted with revenge for me, toppling his own family for my sake across 2 lifetimes. How could I not like him? I murmured, "Alex, I've divorced Jonathan." I leaned against him. I heard his heartbeat quicken, his arms tightening around me, enveloping me entirely. "Olivia, can you?" I nodded emphatically. The next moment, he bent down and kissed my lips. Amidst the fragrance of flowers in shades of pink and yellow, we kissed passionately. The last chapter of the past life had finally come to a close.